Where do we go when we sleep? What are dreams but echoes of trauma that we register beneath the black stillness of nothing? We are nothing. Sinster Narratives presents
Sherlock Holmes and Juan Watson, the OnlyFans murderer. In a posh apartment overlooking the city, moonlight streamed through sheer curtains, casting a silvery glow over the room. Jasmine, a popular OnlyFans model known for her fiery red hair and piercing blue eyes, sat at her vanity, adjusting her necklace. She'd recently begun using her platform to spotlight LA's homeless crisis, much to her followers' surprise. Suddenly, the room's temperature dropped, and the lights flickered. She glimpsed a shadow in her mirror, but before she could turn around, a hand closed around her neck, silencing her scream. She kicked at her assailant, digging her fingers into the skin of his neck, but it was too late. She was too weak. The air flooded from her lungs, and her porcelain skin became ravaged with deep blue-purple veins that constricted her visage. Blaring vermilion, Jasmine's eyes went still, as the assailant's greedy gasps for air continued uninterrupted. The news of Jasmine's death spread like wildfire. Within hours, the boulevards were awash with whispers. Each conversation was punctuated with disbelief and shock, none more so than in a dimly lit bar where Dr. Juan Watson sat nursing his drink. Hard to believe about that Jasmine girl, huh? The bartender mused, drying a glass. Out of the blue, she becomes a legit advocate for the homeless, and then she gets attacked. It's insane. Watson nodded, lost in thought. Yes, it's tragic. Her death will be just another forgotten statistic. Just then, a patron a few stools down leaned in. You know what's odd? They say there's this haunting violin music echoing around Skid Row, like a lament for all the lost souls. The patron shook his head. Crackheads, he cackled. Watson's heart raced. He quickly settled his bill and left, heading straight for the alleys that formed LA's maze-like underbelly. That's not a crackhead, Watson muttered. That's my friend. The melancholic notes of a violin guided him, each strain pulling at his heartstrings. Turning a corner, he found Sherlock, deeply engrossed in his music, violin tucked under the stubble of his chin. He was a withered skeleton, draped in dapper duds, that stood tall and proud in the filthy streets. As the last note lingered in the air, Watson remarked, "Playing for an audience that truly listens? Try posting to Spotify next time, huh?" Holmes looked up, surprised but warmed by his friend's presence. "Watson," he said with a weak smile, "you always did have impeccable timing, and poor taste," he remarked, frowning at his shoes. "They were a gift from a friend," Watson assured. "A lady friend?" Sherlock asked, and off Watson's look. "Juanito is back in action. I always hated what's-her-face. Buck teeth, mousy features. Her name was Carolina, and she was a Miss Universe contestant. Hardly mousy in any way." "Like I said," Holmes chirped. "Hideous." Watson's eyes darted to a discarded fentanyl patch nearby. "You've been missing, Sherlock. People are concerned." "People?" Sherlock inquired. "People are concerned?" He spins around, animated, searching for these so-called people concerned for him or his violin playing. "Stop," Watson called. "Do I have to fucking say it?" He lowered his voice. "I fucking missed you, Sherlock." He gently shoved his friend. "You piece of shit." Holmes nodded, dead inside. "There, that makes sense. You have no other friends?" Holmes sighed, lowering his violin. "I've been preoccupied. The city's cries are deafening, Juan, especially now." Watson, piecing things together, asked, "The OnlyFans star's death?" "Yes. I see that you have an account, too." Sherlock chuckled. "Well, I have 3. He grinned. "Back to Jasmine," Watson grunted. Holmes nodded gravely. "There's a pattern, and she's not the first." "She's not?" "Just the first beautiful death with a large enough following to make a splash in this endless sea of taco trucks and do-nothing celebrities." Watson nods, following along. She was strangled. Were the others? No. Method of murder varies with each case. Gunshots, stabbings, drownings. What's the connection? I have my suspicions, my dear Juanito. The game's afoot. But it's darker and more treacherous than anything we've faced. And thus, amidst the towering skyscrapers and hidden alleys, the duo was pulled once more into the waves of crime that seemed to perpetually beckon them. As the neon lights of LA painted the city in a kaleidoscope of colors, Holmes and Watson strolled the boulevards, passing landmarks that represented a different era of Hollywood. Watson tried to keep the conversation light. You know, if we were in a film noir, you'd be the mysterious musician with secrets, and I'd be the wisecracking sidekick, he said with a smirk. Holmes chuckled. And in that film, would I be battling addiction whilst we chase a killer? Watson sighed. Touché. But in all seriousness, Sherlock, we need a plan. This isn't Victorian London. It's modern LA. Things work differently here. Holmes raised an eyebrow. Is that a challenge or a warning? Both, Watson replied. As they navigated through LA's nightlife, Watson noticed Holmes's growing discomfort and intensified agitation. His friend was going through withdrawal, and the detective's mood swings had become more erratic. Reaching a swanky bar in Malibu, Holmes paused, studying the scene. You know, for all its advancements, society still loves its masks and facades. They just use Instagram filters now. It was at that moment Watson's phone buzzed with a notification. An Instagram story from a pseudonymous account showcased a blurred image, but in its corner, a glint of diamond was unmistakable. Holmes peered over Watson's shoulder, and his face lit up with recognition. Ah, our catalyst, Holmes murmured. You see that insignia in the corner? It's the sign of an exclusive club for LA's elite. Our thief is not just a common criminal. He's one of them, an insider. The trail led them to a series of underground parties where the city's elite mingled with abandon. Watson was struck by the stark contrast of this world to the streets they had just traversed. Velvet ropes, champagne, and an air of arrogance. The deeper they delved, the more Holmes's once impeccable composure began to fray. The weight of his addiction and the complexity of the mystery pulled him in opposing directions. One evening, after an exhausting day of chasing leads and dodging paparazzi, Watson found Holmes on a balcony overlooking the city. The detective's silhouette was bathed in the soft glow of city lights, his face showing the strain of their investigation. I've been pondering, Holmes began without turning, how a city so full of life can harbor such darkness. Our killer not only targets OnlyFans models, but has also set his eyes on the homeless. Why? Watson frowned. Maybe it's about control? When OnlyFans models were being attacked, I thought it would be some religious nut trying to erase sin or whatever. But if they're hunting the homeless, it too could be about disgust. Holmes pulls out a vape, taking a deep drag. Perhaps. But there's a pattern, Watson. I've come across a list, all high-profile thefts over the past year. The stolen items are more symbolic than valuable. It's as if our thief is mocking his victims, or maybe the city itself. They continued their investigation, spiraling deeper into the seedy underbelly of Hollywood. Holmes's growing fascination with the case seemed directly proportional to his descent into LA's darker side, both figuratively and literally. Watson watched in silent anguish as his friend oscillated between the brilliant detective he knew and the addicted man struggling with his demons. One evening, amidst the clamor of a Hollywood party, Holmes, eyes alert and face pale from withdrawal, cornered one of the influencers. With rapid-fire questioning, he pieced together the puzzle. OnlyFans models, advocacy for the homeless, high-profile thefts. Each piece clicked into place. The influencer, sweat forming on his brow, stammered, "You don't understand. This goes deeper than you can imagine. People at the top, they're involved. Holmes, eyes piercing, demanded, "Who?" But before the man could respond, a commotion erupted. Flashing lights, security personnel, and a sea of people swirled around them. The influencer was whisked away, leaving Holmes and Watson in a daze. Catching his breath, Watson muttered, "Well, that escalated quickly." Holmes, ever the master of wit even in distress, replied, "It always does, doesn't it? There's a private party within the party. An underground pool," Sherlock muttered from out of nowhere. "How do you know, Sherlock?" "My little friends tell me things," he responded with a sinister tone. Watson eyed his friend's trembling hands and sighed. "Let's find the pool," Watson suggested. Holmes cuts him off. There were 57 guests in attendance, but now only 54. Watson, impressed. "No one left the premises. I watched all the exits all night." "So where have they gone?" Watson asked, staring down the hallway. "Care to go skinny dipping in the moonlight?" When Holmes and Watson slipped through the hallway, they were embraced by an ornate bookcase that reached the sky-high ceilings, littered with thousands of books. They both sighed, inconvenienced, when Watson lifted and felt the soles of his shoes tacked to the floor. "Sticky floors," he said. "I smell cleaning agents. Bleach, peroxide, maybe." Sherlock brought out a light wand. "Shut off the lights, Watson." In the dark, Sherlock turned on the black light, revealing footprints and streaks all over the floor, but not directed to the bookcase. Peculiarly enough, they led to a Rococo painting on the west wall. The gold-framed portrait was of an angel feasting on the fruit that hung low from the tree of knowledge. "Someone was dragged, against their will," Watson surmised. Without another word, Holmes felt the edges of the painting and swung it open like a door with a charged grunt. They used their cell phones to illuminate the trek down the never-ending cobblestone staircase. Sherlock paused, glaring at Watson to freeze. "I hear voices," he said. Watson was unsure if the voices were ahead or lived solely in his friend's head, as he gazed into the sleepless, haunted eyes beaming back. "Juan, if something happens, you run out. Save yourself. Hide in plain sight with the other partygoers. Scream like a bitch if you have to." Sure enough, the voices that Holmes heard lied ahead. "Please, please let me go," a man shrieked. Only his pleas seemingly went ignored as he wailed in agony. "Mommy, mommy, mommy," the man cried. Sherlock and Watson creeped from the corner, unseen, as they lay witness to a huddle of cloaked figures staring down into a swimming pool free of any water. Something was going down, 6 feet under. Before Watson could restrain him, Holmes tiptoed closer and closer behind the hooded figures. He didn't care about them, not one bit. He only sought to learn what was unfolding within the man-made pit. Arm's length from the spectators who watched in excitation, laughing at the dark scene before them, Sherlock peered into the depths of the pool. He shuddered, tears glistening in his gaze. 20 or 30 bodies lay strewn about, lifeless, pools of blood forming at their crowns. One hooded figure stood above all else as he tortured the man who cried for his mother. Sherlock's haunted, sunken eyes widened to the horrors before him. He recognized the faces of the dead, even if he had only met them briefly. They were his homeless comrades that had accepted him, graciously sharing their cigarettes, sandwiches, and syringes. A hooded woman turned around, staring face to face with Holmes, and screamed. Without another thought, before the other hooded figures could intervene, Holmes shoved the woman into the empty pool, crash-landing on the tortured dead if she were lucky. If not, she'd be cracking her skull on the cold concrete like the others. Holmes wouldn't know the fate of this woman, of course, as he sprinted up the cobblestone staircase with Watson at his side. Back at Sherlock's mansion, his fentanyl cravings making him more volatile, exacerbated by the fits of rage and sorrow. Watson, ever the stalwart friend, tried to navigate these treacherous waters with a mix of concern and levity. Watson quipped, "You know, Sherlock, if caffeine were as potent as fentanyl, I'd be as erratic as you are now." Holmes, looking haggard, shot back with a smirk. "And I'd be out of a job. You'd have solved the case ages ago." Watson grumbled. "Ah, there's the Juanito I know and love," Sherlock mocked. There wasn't the playful tone that Watson had hoped to hear. There was venom in Holmes's words. "My little John." Holmes, having hacked some celebrity social media accounts and with a touch of blackmail, secured them an invitation under the guise of international film producers. A secretive gathering at a sprawling Hollywood Hills mansion. As the duo entered, they were immediately swept up in the whirlwind of opulence and excess. Everywhere, LA's elite mingled, sipping on rare cocktails and trading industry secrets. Holmes, in his element, whispered to Watson, "In a place of masks and illusions, the truth often hides in plain sight." Watson rolled his eyes. "No shit, Sherlock." Holmes began to move through the crowd, engaging with guests, listening more than talking. Each interaction was a calculated dance, with Holmes leading, always 2 steps ahead. But as the night wore on, Watson noticed a change in his friend. The detective's sharpness was dulled by the potent pull of his addiction. His observations became fragmented, his demeanor increasingly desperate. Finding a quiet corner, Watson tried to ground his friend. "Sherlock, you need to pull yourself together. We're so close." Holmes, sweat forming on his brow, replied shakily, "I know, but the game's pull and the drug's pull are at war within me. One seeks clarity, the other oblivion." Suddenly, a familiar face caught Holmes's attention. Luna Del Mar, the Hollywood sensation they had encountered from a previous case. Her demeanor was different, not the radiant starlet, but a woman who bore the weight of a heavy secret. Approaching her, Holmes ventured, "Ms. Del Mar, I believe we're all actors tonight. But some roles, they become too real, don't they?" Luna, taken aback in her Tom Ford black padlock chained-heeled sandals, hesitated, then in a hushed tone replied, "You have no idea what you're getting into, Mr. Holmes. Leave now, while you still can." But Holmes pressed on. "Your manager, he's involved, isn't he?" Luna's eyes widened. "How did you—" Before she could finish, an alarm blared through the mansion. Red lights bathed the rooms. Chaos ensued as guests scrambled in panic. Holmes, ever the opportunist, spotted Luna's manager discreetly making his way to a concealed door. Without thinking, Holmes gave chase, with Watson close on his heels. They descended into a series of tunnels beneath the mansion. Cornering the manager in a dimly lit chamber, Holmes, fueled by adrenaline and desperation, confronted him. "It's over. We know about the thefts, the connection with the OnlyFans models, hunting the homeless. Everything, you sick, pathetic man." The manager, a smug smile playing on his lips, retorted, "You think you know, but you've only scratched the surface. This city, its underbelly, it's another beast entirely. Like parasites waiting to clean you out, even the great Sherlock Holmes." Then, with tremendous grit, the manager stepped before Holmes, sizing him up. "You can't touch me. Nobody can." Holmes spat at the man and grumbled, "Tag, you're it, dipshit." In a swift move, the manager lunged at Holmes, who, weakened by withdrawal, was caught off guard. The two tumbled, a desperate struggle of wills. Just as things looked bleak, Watson, with a surge of strength, intervened, pulling the manager off Holmes. As they restrained him, Luna appeared, tears streaming down her face. "It's true," she whispered. "He's been orchestrating these thefts for years, in league with a crime lord. He had been inviting models to his parties, internet models. They weren't charmed by his fights and hunts on the homeless, so he silenced them too." Holmes, catching his breath, replied, "In a city of shadows, Ms. Del Mar, even the brightest lights can be eclipsed." Luna nodded. "The price of fame, Mr. Holmes. Sometimes it's too high." "What I wouldn't do to get high right now," Sherlock muttered. The following days were a blur of testimonies, legal battles, and media frenzy. Luna Del Mar's reputation took a hit, but her honesty eventually won the public's admiration. The manager's sinister operations came crashing down, and with it, the crime lord's reign over the city's dark underbelly. Yet, amidst the resolution, a deepening rift had formed between Holmes and Watson. Holmes's struggle with addiction and the emotional toll of the case had led to a disturbing transformation. The brilliant detective, once driven by logic and deduction, was now overshadowed by his need for fentanyl. One evening, in the muted glow of Holmes's LA penthouse, Watson found himself treading on broken glass, both figuratively and literally. "Holmes," Watson began, trying to choose his words carefully. "You've won. The case is closed. Isn't it time to close the chapter on this vice of yours?" Holmes, looking out at the city's sprawling lights, retorted, "Watson, for all your medical acumen, you misunderstand. This isn't just a vice, it's a part of me now, just as much as my violin or my magnifying glass app." Watson's concern was palpable. "That's the drug talking. The Sherlock I know is evolving, Juan," Holmes interrupted, his voice filled with a strange calmness. "Or devolving, depending on one's perspective." In a rare display of vulnerability, Watson's voice broke. "I cannot stand by and watch you destroy yourself. You're more than this." Holmes turned, a sad smile touching his lips. "Sometimes, my dear Juanito, our demons chase us, and sometimes we chase our demons. It's like you said before. This is the city of fallen angels." Before Watson could reply, there was a knock on the door. It was a messenger with a packaging. Holmes opened it to find a small box containing a syringe filled with a clear liquid. There was a note. "For the insatiable hunger, M." Watson's eyes widened. "Moriarty." Holmes chuckled, a cold, detached sound. "Indeed. He always did have a flair for the dramatic. It's giving pick-me energy." In a last-ditch attempt, Watson made his plea. "Sherlock, come with me. Let's leave this city, start fresh. You need help." Holmes paused, looking at his reflection in the penthouse window. "In another life, Watson." And with that, Sherlock Holmes vanished without a word. While walking the streets of Skid Row, Watson overheard a familiar tune. It was a melancholic violin melody, reminiscent of their days in university. Following the sound, he came across a group of homeless people gathered around a fire. Among them was a man with unkempt hair, ragged clothes, and piercing eyes, lost in his music. Watson approached hesitantly. "Sherlock?" The man looked up, his once sharp gaze now clouded. "Watson? Or a figment of my fractured psyche?" Watson, swallowing hard, replied, "It's me, bro. It's me." Holmes stared blankly for a moment. Then recognition dawned. "Ah, the ever-loyal Dr. Juan Watson. Come to save the fallen hero?" Watson's voice trembled with emotion. "I came to find my friend." Holmes chuckled, the sound devoid of its usual mirth. "And so you have, though perhaps not in the state you imagined." Looking around at the desolate surroundings, Watson tried to lighten the mood. "Well, your choice of residence has certainly shifted. From penthouse views to open skies." Holmes smirked. "Always the optimist, aren't you?" There was a silence, laden with years of camaraderie, challenges, and change. Holmes broke the quiet. "Tell me, Watson, in this vast city of dreams and nightmares, do you ever wonder if reality is just the space between?" Watson sighed. "Every day, Sherlock. Every day." "You should know. The homeless have made me their king, Sherlock shared jovially. You're shitting me. Ah, yes, don't step there, Sherlock grumbled. Your ugly shoes. How are things with your lady friend? Should I be meeting her soon? Maybe not at all, Watson replied. She booked a pilot for this Lifetime special. Don't want to talk about it. Then let's go back to talking about me. Seriously, my opioid family. They tell me things, Juan. Their eyes are what light this city's night. Watson, unsure whether to be weary or impressed, smiled encouragingly. They tell me things. Is it about Moriarty? Watson asked. That magnificent bastard is coming for me. Maybe over a cup of coffee, fat stack of pancakes, oodles and oodles of syrupy butter. My treat, Sherlock. Naturally, Juan. As the night deepened, the two sat side by side, united in silence, each lost in his thoughts. The bright lights of Los Angeles twinkled in the distance, a stark contrast to the dim glow of the fires of Skid Row.